As the days progress, we all start to wonder, when is Mercedes going to be back at the top? And how could they manage to get such an advantage? Well, one way they could use this is by misinterpreting the regulations and using dark areas of the rulebook to get better than they currently are. So in this video, we'll go through every time Mercedes use regulation loopholes to get their advantage and see what they're trying to do this season. So let's get right into it. As we all know, until last year, Mercedes dominated every race on the Formula 1 calendar. But since their team is kind of new and does not have a lot of experience, it's not uncommon to wonder why they were so powerful. Part of that is thanks to their engineers, who are among the best in the world, not only on the designing level but also in finding flaws in the regulations to make the cars faster. Every year since they started winning, they have introduced an update that made the car much faster than its competitors. So let's have a look at some examples. In 2012, the FIA made it mandatory for teams to reduce the amount of gas blowing out the exhaust to minimize the impact on aerodynamics, making for closer racing and less complicated engineering. Of course, Mercedes found a loophole by tweaking the electronics of their car that made them maximize that amount when driver's foot was off the pedal, gaining an advantage over their competition and making them able to win their first race in Formula 1 in over 60 years. In 2014, unfortunately, there weren't enough rule changes for the car to use dark areas of the rulebook. The only thing the team could work on was reducing turbo lag, but the advantage they gained was small and was pretty much legal. Despite all this, Mercedes still managed to cause controversy by having a secret test in Barcelona with Pirelli to look at how new tyres performed. Since in-season testing was and currently is forbidden, and because Merck was using that year's car, there was a lot of rumours around the paddock of them being disqualified from the whole championship. Still, in the end, the federation just reprimanded the drivers. Do you know what the fun part is? The FIA actually agreed to let them do the test beforehand. In 2015, as Mercedes was the defending champion, both with the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, they had to come up with something genius to be faster than the competition. So they found out that it wasn't specified where the front wing mounted cameras had to be in the rulebook. So they just put them up in the air. The cameras were a separate piece from the frame, and they were held up by two 90 degrees pieces to gain an aerodynamic advantage by not disrupting the airflow over the car. Then, in 2016, Mercedes was able to find a loophole in heavily unregulated areas of the rulebook that enabled them to cut several channels into the floor of the car, giving them some advantage despite ground effect cars being banned almost 4 decades ago. It also made the car go more towards the car's rear, so that competitors wouldn't be able to follow them as closely in twisty corners where high downforce is required. In 2017, Mercedes arrived at Silverstone with a new component on top of the engine cover, and right in the front of the rear wing. It was originally thought to be some kind of sensor mount, but it later came out just for aerodynamic purposes. Since that year, there were serious regulation changes regarding the rear wing, which was made larger and more effective. Mercedes cleverly thought of using a leftover from the previous rulebook to make their new wing more usable and with stable air coming through it, leaving them with a sensitive advantage over their competition. Not only that, but they also made the clutches on the steering wheel easier for the drivers to use. In the year, the FIA ruled it illegal to map the clutch to have a better start and force all the teams to use a linear clutch design, with the maximum clutch lever on the steering wheel set at 80mm. Mercedes cleverly thought of adding imprints of the driver's fingers into the clutch paddle, so that they could have more control and precision over their actions. As expected, this was later deemed illegal, and the car manufacturer was forced to remove it in the following seasons. Despite what you were thinking, in 2018, Merck couldn't do much. There were no big regulation changes, thus no loophole that they could use. So instead, the team just focused on cutting small holes in the rim of their wheels to gain an aerodynamic advantage. This was later discovered, and Mercedes was forced to close those holes with silicone. Once again, in 2019, nothing happened. How weird, right? Well, they were just preparing for what was about to come. The 2020 Formula 1 season saw the introduction from Mercedes itself of the dual-axis steering, DAS for short. A system that could change the toe of the tyres, which is how much the front two tyres are pointing towards each other on the straight. Where a bit of toe in makes the car go much faster, and before corners, where toe out is often the right choice to have more grip. The drivers could use the DAS on the go while driving by getting the steering wheel closer or further from themselves, which led to over a half-second gained on the straights alone. Although the technology was thought to be illegal by other teams who saw it as a movable aerodynamic device, which is not allowed, reasons they didn't copy the car, the FIA deemed it completely legal but banned it from the next season onwards. But it doesn't end there. Mercedes then brought to the grid a new engine mode called Party Mode, which during qualifying could get them 7 extra tenths thanks to the engine being used at its fullest potential. Although it was legal at the time, the FIA had to act quickly to make changing engine mode during quali and the race not allowed, so that the team wouldn't have an advantage over the competitors. But it was probably already too late. In 2021, Mercedes kept it simple, because they were at risk of losing the championship, which they actually did in the end, and didn't want to risk it all just because of a loophole. They did use a rear wing that was more flexible than allowed on Hamilton's car, which is the reason he was disqualified from the qualifying during 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix, and had to start at the sprint race last. But in the end, he still managed to win the full-length race, so that wasn't too bad for him. In 2022, Mercedes was hoping to return to the top, so they invented a new side pod design that incorporated almost no inlet for air. Mercedes was forced to put the carbon fibre skeleton of the car, mandatory for the driver's safety, out in the air. Although Merck says that cooling performance is the same as it would have been with normal side pods, and although the original intent of this design was to reduce drag on the straights, they ended up building one of the draggiest cars on the grid this season. So, is it completely over for Mercedes? No, not really. Even though the budget cap doesn't help teams in this situation, there are many engineers working at Mercedes whose job is just to improve the car. Seeing how the current season is going, it's not unlikely that the team is already focusing on next year, bringing upgrades to races just to test out new ideas. We've seen this at the US Grand Prix when they brought a new front wing design that featured small flow directors as pieces of support of the wing. The wing wasn't used, both because the two they had were the only ones they could manufacture in time for the race, and because the Federation deemed it illegal due to those exact flow directors. It is expected that the team will be able to race this week in Mexico with this new type of wing, so we'll see. At the end of the day, even though Mercedes fans use most of their time criticizing their own favourite team, the Silver Arrows home didn't do anything wrong. They were just a bit unlucky with the regulation changes, which heavily affected their car's performance. But this doesn't mean that the German car manufacturer will stop trying to win. Instead, they'll keep finding loopholes and get a winning car back on the grid. So what do you think? Will Mercedes be back on top next season? Or are they just a midfield team now? What was your favourite loophole they used? Let us know with a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, because at 10,000 subscribers, we'll find a regulation loophole in the rulebook and make a new F1 car faster than anything you've seen. No, not really, but you should subscribe anyway.